The return of America's elephant. Many refer to wood bison. Wood bison were declared extinct in the 1900s until a tiny herd was found in a remote section of Canada.
This began as a risk no one could control. In the far north of Canada, in a valley cut off from everything, a helicopter arrived carrying 28 massive wood bison.
A heavy-lift transport helicopter dropped 28 gigantic wooden crates into the middle of the wilderness. Inside were 28 wood bison one-ton creatures.
These animals were on the edge of extinction, with only a few hundred left in the world. There were no roads, no protection, no guarantee they would survive. The goal was simple: release them and hope. Months later, scientists came back expecting loss. Instead, they found something strange. Let's uncover what really happened. The animal that almost disappeared from the earth. The wood bison is not just any large animal. It is the largest land mammal on the North American continent. Adult males stand nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, stretch up to 3.5 meters in length, and can weigh over 1,000 kilograms. Their shoulder hump, taller and more forward set than their planes, is solid muscle, built specifically for one purpose: sweeping heavy northern snow aside to reach buried grasses and sedges in winter. Their fur is not hollow like a moose's. It is thick and warm, like human hair, and helps keep them warm in the cold. They can detect smells from up to 3 kilometers away. Despite their size, they can run at 55 kilometers per hour and swim across wide rivers without hesitation. These are not fragile animals. They were built for exactly the kind of landscape that would have ended almost anything else. For 60 million years, bison shaped North America. At their peak just 200 years ago, an estimated 60 million animals moved freely from Alaska to Mexico, from the Pacific to the Atlantic. Wolves, bears, ravens, nesting shorebirds, and dozens of plant communities built their entire existence around the bison. By 1889, the entire bison population across North America had collapsed to an estimated 541 animals. Commercial hunters had brought them down in millions for their hides, leaving their remains to rot across the plains. Sport hunters tracked them from moving trains for entertainment. The United States Army actively encouraged their end because removing the bison was the fastest way to destroy the plains of nations that depended on them entirely for food, clothing, shelter, and survival. In the space of 20 years, one of the greatest wildlife populations the Earth had ever produced was erased. As time went on, the wood bison, the larger, darker northern subspecies, adapted to deep cold and forest and were able to survive a bit longer. A remnant population held on in the remote north near what is now Wood Buffalo National Park, stretching across Alberta and the Northwest Territories. By the early 1900s, the entire Canadian wood bison population was estimated at just 250 animals. Then, the government made things considerably worse. Between 1925 and 1928, 6,673 plains bison were moved into Wood Buffalo National Park, into the same territory where the surviving wood bison lived. The plains bison were carrying diseases like bovine tuberculosis and brucellosis. These diseases spread quickly. By the 1940s, scientists believed pure wood bison no longer existed anywhere on Earth. The subspecies was tagged as gone. But in 1957, a bush pilot spotted something unusual from the air: a small herd of bison in a remote corner of Wood Buffalo National Park near the Needle River. They were darker than plains bison, larger, different, and soon biologists were sent in to confirm. Hidden inside 200 kilometers of dense, remote boreal forest, roughly 200 pure wood bison had survived, completely isolated from the contaminated population. The subspecies was not gone. It had been hiding from a world that had already given up on it as lifeless. That discovery changed everything. But the road from 200 hidden survivors to a functioning wild population was longer and harder than anyone initially understood. And the first question nobody really asked was this: what is lost when an animal this large disappears completely? The answer to that question is what turned the 1980 release into more than just a conservation project. It became one of Canada's most important ecological decisions. The seed bank, building the animals before the release. Getting from 200 survivors in a remote national park to a functioning, free-ranging population required a foundation. That foundation was built quietly in Alberta at Elk Island National Park over more than a decade before the first helicopter ever lifted off. In 1965, 22 wood bison were carefully selected from the hidden herd in Wood Buffalo National Park and transferred to a disease-free enclosure at Elk Island called the South Paddock. The logic was straightforward. Separate the healthy animals from the contaminated zone, give them clean ground, and let them reproduce. The wood buffalo population had the highest genetic diversity of all wood bison populations in the world, and those 22 animals carried that diversity with them. Elk Island staff spent the years that followed monitoring genetics, disease testing every animal, and managing the herd with one goal: build enough surplus animals so they could support several reintroductions at once, instead of relying on a single small batch each time. Bison herds at Elk Island, with no natural predators and reliable grazing, grew at 20 to 25% per year. That growth rate is remarkable for animals of this size. It meant the seed bank kept producing faster than it was consumed. Within 15 years, Elk Island had become what biologists quietly called a production facility for one of North America's rarest animals, a living reserve of disease-free, genetically representative wood bison ready to be moved. By 1980, the team was ready for the first major test. The location chosen was the Nahani watershed in the southwestern Northwest Territories, a vast, remote river valley near the 61st parallel, deep inside the Canadian subarctic, cold, isolated, and untouched. Exactly the kind of landscape wood bison had occupied for thousands of years before they vanished from it. 28 animals were sedated, loaded into crates, and airlifted by helicopter into the valley in June of 1980. They were released near Nahani Butte. The biologists watched the crates open. The bison stepped out onto the ground their ancestors had shaped for thousands of years. And then the team left. There was no backup plan, no emergency feed, no way to intervene if the herd struggled. Temperatures in the Northwest Territories drop to minus 60 degrees Celsius in winter. Snow sits on the ground for 7 months. You load the animals, you release them, and then you wait. 8 months later, in the frozen silence of a Northwest Territories winter, the survey team flew back. What they found were tracks, then the animals themselves, and then calves. The bison had not just survived one of the harshest thermal environments in North America, they had reproduced inside it. The team had aimed for survival. What they found was the beginning of something much larger. What made the calves especially significant was the biology behind them. Wood bison carry their young for 9 months before giving birth. Calves are born mainly in May and June. Most calves arrive in the world bright orange, and they darken as they age. Within 30 minutes of birth, a wood bison calf can stand. Within hours, it can run. The cows released into the Nahani Valley had been pregnant when the crates opened. They had survived being sedated, crated, airlifted, and released into an unfamiliar landscape while carrying young. Then they had navigated an Arctic winter in that condition and delivered healthy calves into one of the coldest environments on Earth. That is not an adaptation. That is a species that was designed for this exact challenge. But survival was only the beginning. What nobody had fully thought of was what 28 large grazers would do to the landscape around them and how fast they would do it. What the bison did to the land that no engineer could replicate. The survival of the Nahani herd became the main story, but the real changes were happening in the soil, the grass, the wallows, and the food chains that started to rebuild as soon as the bison arrived. Scientists call this ecosystem engineering. Wood bison are one of the strongest examples of it. It begins with grazing. Wood bison are grass eaters. Ecologists call them graminoid specialists. They mainly eat grasses and sedges, not because nothing else exists, but because they prefer them. When no one manages the land, strong grasses take over and push out other plants. Over time, this reduces how many species can grow there. When bison feed, they do not destroy the land. They shape it. They leave a mix of areas: short grass in some places, taller grass in others, and small bare patches in between. This uneven pattern creates space for many different plants and animals to survive in the same area. A study published in 2022 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. It followed bison reintroductions for about 30 years. The results showed a steady rise in plant diversity over time. These changes lasted longer and worked better than cattle grazing or planned restoration done by humans. Then there is wallowing.
So if a lot of you don't know what a bison waller is, this is basically where the bison roll around. They kind of dust off to get some of those parasites off of them, just kind of clean off, get the flies off of them. They're just like rolling around in it.
A bison finds a dry patch of ground, lowers its body, and rolls its heavy frame into the soil. It repeats this action many times, often returning to the same spot over and over until the ground is dug out into a bowl shaped about 2 meters wide and around 30 centimeters deep. When rain falls, water collects in this hollow. It turns into a small wet area on the land. This small wet area becomes important for life. It supports insects that live in water, small amphibians like frogs, and birds that need shallow water for living. These species would not survive well in the dry, open ground around them, because there is no natural standing water nearby. Later, when the water dries up, the story does not end. The exposed soil remains open and loose. This creates space for new plants to grow. Some of these plants cannot grow in thick, crowded grass, so this open patch becomes their only chance to survive in that area. One animal creates the change. One repeated behavior shapes the land.
Nature has this remarkable ability to heal if you just give it space and time, and if you put the right players back in the game. Bison can be a nature-based solution to the problem.
Over time, many of these small actions across the landscape build completely new spaces where none existed before. A 2018 study published in the journal Ecosphere found that bison wallows increase the number of insects and small arthropods like beetles and spiders. These changes happen both in space and over time. The result is not a flat, simple environment, but small pockets of rich biological activity in areas that would otherwise stay uniform and less different. Then there is dung. A grown wood bison produces large amounts of manure as it moves across the land every day. Each dropping acts like a natural fertilizer, adding nutrients back into the soil. This supports plant growth and also attracts insects that feed on it. Those insects then become food for birds, so the effect spreads through the food chain. Bison also shed thick wool from their bodies in spring. Small birds collect this wool and use it to build nests, which helps them survive and raise their young. In addition, bison rub their bodies against trees. This strips bark from older trees and can destroy young ones. Over time, this slows the spread of forest into open land. It keeps some areas open and stable, which is important for many plants and animals that depend on grassland to survive. Then there is fire. Bison grazing reduces the amount of dry grass and dead plants spread across the land. In boreal forests, this dry material is what helps wildfires spread quickly and burn with high intensity. When bison keep grass shorter and spaced, they naturally reduce how much fuel is available for fire. This lowers the chances of large, fast-moving wildfires. There are no machines involved, no planned burning programs, no government project. It is only the result of an animal doing what it has always done in this kind of environment. The bison hump, the thick, raised part on its back, is not for storing food or fat. It is a strong muscle. It helps the animal push its heavy head through deep snow in winter to reach food buried underneath. Their sense of smell is so strong that they can detect food under snow from far away. They dig through the snow, eat, and move on. As they move, they leave behind clear paths that smaller animals can follow. They also clear areas of snow that other species cannot reach on their own. Nothing about this system was planned by people. It was not designed in offices or written in any plan. It happens because the right animal was returned to a place it shaped for millions of years. The land responds quickly. It does not forget how to work with them. The moment the bison returns, the landscape begins to function again in the way it once did. That wasn't all. The numbers coming from the herds were beyond planning. The numbers nobody expected. The original goal of the 1980 Nahani release was very simple: make sure the herd survives. Success meant only one thing at the time: that the animals would stay alive in the wild. There was no detailed plan for what would happen after that, because no one was sure the project would even work. But it did work. The Nahani herd began to grow. 9 years later, in March of 1989, another 12 bison were released near Nahani Butte to strengthen the population. In 1998, 59 more animals were released north of Fort Liard, expanding the herd's range further into the Liard River Valley. By 2004, the Nahani population had reached 403 animals. By 2011, 431. By 2017, 960. From 28 animals in 1980 to nearly 1,000 in 37 years, spreading across the Liard River Valley into the Northwest Territories, British Columbia, and the Yukon. The Yukon program followed a different path. Between 1982 and 1992, 142 animals from Elk Island National Park were kept inside a 5-square-kilometer enclosure at the Nisling River in the Yukon. They were later released in stages into the surrounding land. The Aishihik herd, named after the lake and region it spread into, grew quickly in its early years at about 20% per year. There were few natural predators, so the population increased without much control. By 1998, the herd had doubled in size and expanded far beyond its expected range. 36 animals even had to be relocated after they caused traffic risks along the Alaska Highway. By 2011, the herd had grown past 1,230 animals. By 2022, it reached an estimated 1,951 adult bison. The Mackenzie herd followed a different timeline. In 1963, 16 animals were moved from Wood Buffalo National Park to the Mackenzie Bison Sanctuary north of Great Slave Lake. 2 passed on soon after arrival, leaving 14 as the founding group. Over time, this herd grew steadily and eventually reached about 2,400 animals. However, an anthrax outbreak between 2012 and 2013 caused a major drop in numbers. By 2019, the population had recovered to around 1,945 animals. The legal status of the wood bison shows this recovery in clear steps. In 1978, Kosewik, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, officially listed the wood bison as endangered. At that time, the species was still at risk of disappearing. In 1988, the status was changed to threatened. This meant the population had recovered enough that extinction was no longer seen as an immediate danger, but the species still needed protection. In 2013, after numbers continued to rise across different herds, Kosewik reviewed the species again and moved it to special concern. The change from endangered to special concern over 35 years shows a steady recovery supported by both protection and the species' own strength. Today, about 7,000 wood bison exist across the Northwest Territories, the Yukon, British Columbia, Alberta, and Manitoba. Around 90% live in free-ranging herds managed in public land. The remaining 10% are kept in captive breeding programs that act as backup populations, continuing the seed bank idea that started at Elk Island National Park in 1965. But population numbers do not tell the full story. As bison numbers increased, new problems also appeared. The people nobody asked about. This is the part of the story that conservation reports have historically moved past quickly. It deserves more than that. When the bison were released into the Nisling River watershed in the Yukon between 1988 and 1992, the territory the animals were dropped into was not empty land. It was the traditional territory of the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations people, who had lived on it, hunted it, trapped it, and buried their loved ones on it for generations. They were not asked whether they wanted bison. They were informed that bison were coming. Tom Young, senior wildlife biologist with the Yukon government, who spent more of his career watching this herd than almost anyone else, was direct about what happened. They did not ask the First Nation people if they even wanted the bison, he said. And they did not really consider the broader environmental impact the bison might have on the land those communities depended on.
The protest was not just about animals, it was about sovereignty, the right to decide what happens on land that holds memory and meaning.
The concerns came almost immediately after the releases. Bison were damaging trap lines, the carefully maintained routes that families had used for generations to trap animals through winter. They broke the grass areas where ground squirrels lived. They stepped on berry bushes that people used for food. Sometimes they dropped dung on old cultural places and graves. One elder said the return of bison felt like another decision made on indigenous land without asking indigenous people. This shows a long history of people outside the land making choices without local consent. In 1998, about 10 years after the first bison were released, a group called the Yukon Wood Bison Management Team was formed. It was made up of government wildlife workers and First Nation leaders. They worked together to manage the bison. For the first time, both sides made decisions together. They agreed on hunting rules and set population goals as a group. Later, in 2016, a study in the journal Conservation and Society spoke with local people. It wrote down both the good and bad effects of the bison. People talked about some benefits, but also problems like damage to land, food plants, and important cultural places. The study showed that bringing bison back was not only about nature, it also changed how people used the land and how decisions about the land were made. One elder's words from that study stayed with the researchers. Even with anger about how the bison were brought back, damage to trap lines, disruptions to sacred places, and years of not being asked, he still said he was happy the bison returned. He believed his grandchildren would need them in the future. That one sentence shows how complex this story is. Bringing the bison back helped nature, but the process caused impact to people. Both are true at the same time. The lesson is clear now. People who live on the land must be asked before animals are released there, not after. This idea is now used in conservation planning around the world. Later, hunting rights were agreed on with the Champagne and Aishihik First Nations after the herd became stable. Some hunters who were once angry about the bison slowly began to accept them. Over time, they built a new relationship with the animals. When people know an animal, use it, and benefit from it, they are more likely to protect it. This change from anger to care is seen as one of the most important results of the Yukon program. Today, about 97.4% of the bison's original home range is still not available to them because of human use and land rules. They now live only in small managed areas compared to where they once moved freely. The recovery is real, but not complete. The story shows that bringing animals back and treating people fairly must go together. One of the most striking things about a large animal returning to a landscape is watching everything else respond. In this case, the food web was not left out. The food web rebuilds itself, almost as if the rest of the food web had been waiting. Within just a few years of the bison arriving in the Yukon, wolves found them. Wolves are wide-ranging, intelligent hunters. They investigate anything new in their territory.
But what amazed scientists the most was the appearance of predators. Only a few years after the release, gray wolf pack had learned how to interact with the new prey wood bison.
A herd of animals weighing up to 1,000 kilograms in a river valley is not something a wolf pack overlooks. Wolves started hunting the bison almost at once. They went after the weak ones first, the young, the sick, and the ones alone. Then grizzly bears came. Bears follow wolves. When wolves make a hit, bears move in and eat what is left. A lifeless bison is a very large source of food. In the Yukon, bears began to stay close to areas where bison lived. They watched the wolves and followed them to fresh hits. After that came ravens, foxes, then smaller animals. Each one feeds in turn. The return of the bison restarted a system that had been quiet for over 100 years. Plants also began to change. In places where bison had been grazing for some years, new plants started to appear. Researchers found grasses and wildflowers that had not been seen in those areas for many years. Before the bison came back, strong grasses had taken over. They blocked out other plants. Nothing else could grow. But when bison grazed, they opened the land. They created space, light, and bare soil. This allowed weaker plants to grow again. The land slowly became more mixed and more alive, starting from the ground up. Wetland birds began nesting in the wallows. Shorebird species that require shallow standing water and exposed bare soil were appearing in parts of the Yukon where they had not been seen before. The bison had created the ponds. The birds had found them. Nobody planned it. Tom Young described what he watched in the simplest terms he could find. "These animals have a long history in this part of the world," he said. "They were here alongside woolly mammoths. What you are watching is not new. It is a relationship between an animal and a landscape, resuming after a very long interruption." The cost comparison is simple and clear. Moving 28 bison into a remote valley by helicopter was expensive, but still far cheaper than trying to replace what those animals later did for free. Wetlands would have needed to be built by hand. Damaged soil would have needed to be repaired. Grasslands would have needed constant management. Insect habitats would have needed active support. Even wildfire control would have been required. In the boreal forest, dry grass builds up and helps fires spread fast. Cutting that fuel load would need machines, workers, and repeated spending every year. Each of these tasks would take many years and large amounts of money. Yet the bison did all of it without any human control. They shaped the land simply by moving, grazing, digging, and living. Then something unexpected happened. The idea did not stay in Canada alone. It started to spread. From near extinction to 3 continents. In 2008, 53 wood bison from Elk Island National Park were transferred to the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center in Anchorage, where they were held in quarantine for 2 years before reintroduction planning continued. In spring 2015, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game released the first herd of 100 animals into the Innoko River area in western Alaska, the first wild wood bison in that region in nearly 100 years. By that same summer, 16 calves had been born in the wild to cows that had been pregnant at the time of release. By 2017, spring calves were arriving earlier and surviving at higher rates than in any previous year of the Alaskan program. The animals had not needed time to adjust. They had simply arrived and resumed. Then came Russia. In 2006, the first of several groups of wood bison were shipped from Elk Island to the Republic of Sakha in Siberia, known as Yakutia, where the extinct steppe bison once roamed.
Archie Handel and his team at Elk Island National Park have a busy day ahead of them. They're loading 30 bison calves into trailers for a trip to Russia.
To test if bison could survive outside North America, more animals were moved in the following years. Additional groups were sent in 2011, 2013, and 2020. In total, more than 120 bison were transferred. By 2019, the herd in Yakutia had grown to over 210 animals. A team of Russian and Korean scientists is studying whether wood bison could help bring back the steppe bison through cloning. Because of this, the wood bison is now being seen as a possible living base for rebuilding an animal that disappeared long ago. In Canada, the same program that began with 28 bison near Nahani Butte in 1980 has grown far beyond its original goal. Since then, nearly 3,000 plains and wood bison have been moved from Elk Island National Park to different conservation projects across North America and other regions. Today, there are only 14 free-ranging wood bison populations left in the world. Just 14. This is a very small number when you remember that this species once existed in the tens of millions across North America. The Nahani herd also shows that recovery is not stable. It grew for many years, but later dropped from 960 animals in 2017 to 544 in 2021. This is important to understand. Wildlife recovery does not move in a straight line. Populations rise and fall. Some herds grow, others shrink. Progress is real, but it is not guaranteed. None of this happened because of a plan. It happened because someone flew 28 animals into a frozen river valley and had the patience to wait 8 months before flying back. What they found in that snow was not just a conservation success. It was proof that nature, given even the smallest opening, will take it. The wood bison nearly vanished from Earth. Instead, it became one of the strongest real examples science has ever shown for rewilding. Not because anyone engineered it that way, but because the right animal returned to the right place, it remembered exactly what it was built to do. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.